Welcome back to Cultivate Talk. Today's episode explores a question that affects nearly all of us, whether we realize it or not. How is technology changing our relationship with money? Joining me is Max Brichta, a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Virginia, whose work examines the intersection of digital finance, media literacy, and communication. Max studies how technologies like payment apps, investing platforms, cryptocurrencies, and social media are shaping the way we spend, save, invest, and make meaning around our financial lives. In this conversation, we discuss why money is about much more than numbers, how financial literacy and media literacy have become deeply intertwined, and what happens when financial decisions are increasingly influenced by algorithms, online communities, and digital platforms. We also explore the communication dynamics behind cryptocurrency, the role of narratives and hype in financial markets, and how young adults can navigate a digital environment where financial information is abundant but not always trustworthy. Whether you're interested in technology, communication, finance, or simply understanding the forces shaping everyday decision-making, this episode offers a fascinating look at how our economic lives are being transformed in the digital age. Let's get into it. So thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Brichta. I am super excited to get the opportunity to talk about your work. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. That's great. So, to kind of kick things off, your work asks a really interesting question. How does technology shape our relationship with money?
Yeah, so um, I've been in communication studies for about a decade or more, and I've had very few people actually address money head on. And it's a fascinating thing to me that money is probably the most powerful symbol that we all organize around. And value is this, the symbolic representation that we make so many transactions with in our everyday lives, and so much of our everyday reality is based around what we could do with our money. And technology is obviously shifting the way that we learn about money, the way that we spend money, the way that we earn money. And so my work broadly looks at how is this changing the way that we actually experience money? How is it that we organize social life differently around the new ways of money and the new ways of learning about money that we have?
Yeah, that is super interesting. And I have also similarly been in this field for about a decade now and have obviously had the opportunity to talk to many wonderful and interesting researchers on this podcast. And it is quickly dawning on me that I actually think you are the first researcher I have ever spoken to in the field of communication studies that does anything remotely related to money. And so it seems like such an important, I mean, it obviously is an important topic, and it's important for everyone to learn about and educate themselves on and kind of really pay attention to how we are consuming and how we are spending. But I think that it's rather interesting that you have taken this somewhat, in some situations, a taboo topic, or maybe a topic people really try to avoid, and have made it part of your focus and have really honed in on it. So I think that is incredibly important and also pretty admirable. So I would love to know, like, what first drew you to the intersection of communication, finance, and technology?
I wasn't originally studying money or the digital economy. I was studying like Christian nationalism and the rhetoric of megachurches and trying to figure out like why these powerful, fervent communities formed, and how they affected politics. And it was around the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, we were in the throes of the pandemic. And my dad had set up an investing account for me, a retirement account for me. And he put some money in there and he said, call Charles Schwab, and they'll give you a free advising of like what to do with this money. And I didn't. I just let it sit there for over a year, and I didn't understand that I had to actively invest it. And then my best friend suggested that I put some money in the speculative oil stock. And so that was my introduction to investing, was putting too much money in this very speculative stock, and ended up, and losing a bunch of money on it. And at the same time, the stock market and the crypto market and everything were going berserk. You could throw your money at seemingly anything, and it could go up for no reason. And it was a very mimetic sort of time for investments um, to be popping off left and right. And so I was trying to figure out how to be an investor. I was trying to figure out how I could make my money grow. And I was on Twitter. I was just trying to find out all of the people who I could listen to who would actually give me some good advice or give me some sort of edge in how to invest. Not in a long-term way. I wasn't trying to figure out how to like grow my retirement or was thinking 20, 30 years out. I was thinking of like, how could I make as much money as quick as possible on this stuff? And a lot of people were and continue to think that way. And at the time, I was starting to turn away from my old strand of research and turn my attention towards another very, very fervent community, and that was cryptocurrency. And there's a lot of people are quick to point out that there's sort of religious sentiments there in itself of people who are sort of diehard and show up every day and believe in this stuff very deeply. And that became really fascinating to me. How it is that people end up coming into this space, how it is that they form such strong bonds with each other and such strong bonds with these particular, emerging assets, and how it is that people, in learning about these particular assets and ways of investing, start to push back against conventional knowledge, start to push back against conventional voices of expertise, and start to push back against conventional ways of making and earning, making and investing your money.
Yeah, absolutely. The correlation between like religion and money and the way that people fully immersed in that world kind of treat it as a certain belief and talk about it as if it is one is really fascinating. I think really important in regard to how we are approaching communication around finance and all of the different narratives and kind of discourse taking place. So yeah, absolutely. We often think of money as purely rational, but your work suggests it's also deeply social and symbolic. How does digital finance change the meaning of money in people's lives?
For one, you're learning about money from people who you resonate with. Whereas, even a decade ago and beyond that, you are generally learning about money through people in your family, through your friends, through whatever sort of like, before the internet, print resources that you could get your hands on, magazines, popular finance, radio personalities, and so forth. And now there's such a broad market of people who are that may relate to you because of demographic reasons, because of socioeconomic status reasons, because they have the economic journey that they're taking taps into the same imagination that you have or that you want for yourself and you also want to tap into. And so for one, it's a much different scenario of who you could learn finance from and very sort of non-traditional sources. But especially when we're talking about the realm of social media, people are getting financial advice from Reddit. There's, hundreds of thousands of people that visit Reddit pages about personal finance and investing per week, probably in the millions actually, who are getting advice from forums of anonymous people who are telling their experience and critiquing other people's experience. And then when you're in the crypto communities, it becomes this like promotional network mechanism that you become a part of. And so you very much become sort of embedded in this collective journey towards advertising for something that you're invested in and trying to get people to, believe the same outcomes in the future that you and your community do. So it becomes a much more social thing and it becomes a much more informal, fractured learning space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I mean, it's so true. These are definitely not spaces that I spend a lot of time in, but it doesn't take very long for me to be on social media for a few minutes and see something in regard to financing or investments or crypto, and really not the algorithm that I have intentionally built, but still stuff that absolutely pops up. So the world of social media has made so much information accessible, including obviously the world of finance and money and kind of learning about it, which I imagine has many, many benefits, but perhaps also some downfalls.
Sure.
So you are part of the Thriving Youth in a Digital Community, pardon me, a Digital Environment Initiative. What are you seeing when it comes to how young adults are navigating money in a digital first world?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this answer is just a sort of recapitulation of what I just mentioned. But one of the things that I sort of left out in that answer is that there is, I touched on the accessibility of financial education, but there is also a profound new, market that's incredibly accessible of financial tools, so that anyone as young as as long as you could get money onto an application or into a bank account, you have a whole suite of financial tools and endless assets that you could invest in, or even when it comes to like sports gambling or prediction markets, ways that you might not consider to be part of personal finance, but things that are very much a part of a lot of young adults, especially young men's lives right now, and falls more into the entertainment category. There is this kind of blurring of the line between uh, doing personal finance and finding entertainment and participating in sort of gamblified, uh, ways of having fun in the privacy of your own phone, having everything from a banking app to Robinhood, where you have access to fractions of stocks and crypto and increasingly complex financial products right in your pocket. And so it's a space where if you grew up on the internet, you're scrappy. You know how to navigate the annals of the internet and find little hacks that work for you and experiment constantly with people from all over the world. And so it becomes, personal finance is becoming much more of like a media literacy uh, thing, where you have to figure out, okay, who am I going to listen to? Um, who, even people who aren't personal finance influencers on the nose, there's still plenty of people online that are talking about money and telling you what you should do with your money, whether you're like Andrew Tate or Mr. Beast or a whole suite of other people that are incredibly influential, for better or worse, in this environment right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a pretty good segue because we used to treat like financial literacy and media literacy separately, but now they seem the lines have blurred, obviously. So it's not necessarily teaching the skills of media literacy, but it's kind of going hand in hand with financial literacy as well. Along with so much now that we have so much access to the internet and new media in general, that can be said for even like the stuff on health that we see and relationships
Yeah,
goes hand in
yeah.
hand in regard to literacy. So absolutely. Um, so from Venmo to investing apps to crypto platforms, financial tools like you just previously mentioned are now embedded in our everyday communication. How does that shift influence spending and decision making?
Ooh, well, you kind of made a really good segue for that. So there is, you mentioned that there's health influencers and so forth, people that are more focused directly on uh, well-being and personal development. What I'm looking at right now is I'm writing an article about personal finance influencers who kind of like toe this line of being a, you know, personal development lifestyle influencer, or what we call finfluencers, financial influencers. What I'm seeing is that money is becoming, at least for these people who are teaching it, and they're some of the most popular people that are teaching money right now in this informal ecosystem, is that they are showing you how money is central to your personal development. They're showing you how money is central to the way that you can live a lifestyle within a particular set of constraints in an increasingly precarious economy. And so it's inviting people into their own personal development journey with money at the center of it, and making it very apparent that money is super mundane. You know, there's a lot of videos of women influencers, for instance, who are sitting there in a pony, in a hoodie, and just doing their budget at a desk. And there's also people who are out and having extravagant vacations. And sometimes these two things happen on the same account, and the images are right next to each other. And so it's just showing that money cuts through so many of the decisions that we make, and a lot of what these people are doing is tuning their viewers in to those sort of micro moments that we feel. Like when we feel FOMO, if we get invited to a party and we don't, or a weekend out with our friends and don't necessarily have the money in our budget for it, or of second guessing and taking a cool off period, waiting 24 or 72 hours before making a big purchase, and tapping into this emotional aspect of money that it might not feel like a personal finance thing, but it's just highlighting all of these little tensions that we have throughout the day that really animate our whole entire way that we walk through the world, and thinking about how we could better develop ourselves to respond to those tensions and respond to those emotions, and to think of it all as a part of this personal growth story.
Yeah, absolutely. That is very well articulated and explained. Thank you. So you have also studied cryptocurrency and disinformation, and which
Mm-hmm.
I personally love because I feel like I find myself in spaces all the time where people are like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
And I'm not much better. I can't necessarily, explain it, or I don't have a wealth of information or knowledge to even think that I can comfortably conceptualize it. So I would love to know, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about crypto right now?
I'd say like 80% of the people who I talk to about it say like, oh, isn't that whole thing just a scam? And like don't have a sense of like what the differences between all of the different cryptocurrencies are. Some people think that Bitcoin just means all of the things, even though it's a very different asset and sort of social movement than a lot of these other cryptocurrencies. So I've been writing recently about crypto and misinformation, kind of as a way to address that and to bring some nuance to this preconception that people have about it. Is a lot of crypto a scam? For sure. There are thousands of cryptocurrencies that are launched every single day, and the vast majority of those are scams. There's a lot of ways in which crypto is used for illicit activity and to augment the ability for people to do phishing attacks and so forth. But what I wanted to do is look at, okay, what are the specific ways that people are scamming people in cryptocurrency? And I've heard a lot of people is like, oh, it's just all hype and nothing else. And it's like, okay, that's true. Most of it is hype, but there's this sort of thin line between earnest hype of people who get into these spaces and believe this is the future, and that I'm investing in something that is going to blow up and that is going to make me money and that is going to be widely adopted. But on the other side of that line is deception, and there's this sort of thin, permeable line that people often kind of swivel back and forth between, where there are plenty of people who are out there who are acting parasitically and want to use disinformation and otherwise disordered information to make people believe something so fervently that they're willing to put their money into it so that they could extract from them. And so, yeah, my recent work has just been looking at some of the mechanisms by which people do that. It's incredibly easy for people to launch their own cryptocurrencies now. All you need is a name, a logo, a ticker symbol, a description, and a little bit of shrewd resourcefulness to try to get attention brought to your coin so that people will pour money into it. And it's just a matter of like how much are you willing to push deceitful information so that you could benefit from it, and people do it on a regular basis. So it's not all a scam. A lot of it is very hopeful, and people think that it is going to be a big part of our future. And there's a lot of differences between all the cryptocurrencies, but a lot of the illicit action and a lot of the losses, which are abundant in the crypto world, definitely taint that view, and for the most part, for good reason.
Awesome. So you mentioned something very important, kind of like how crypto is all about the hype and the narratives in the online communities. How do communication dynamics shape what people believe and invest in?
One of the first papers that I wrote in this space was I noticed that if you go on Telegram, for instance, this is like a central command hub for a lot of the especially smaller cryptocurrencies. This is where you have a bunch of mostly pseudonymous people who are coming together and who become part of this like network promotional mechanism around a cryptocurrency. And I'd be hesitant to call it a community. Sometimes, there's community-like aspects of it, but because of that line between hype and deception, I'm community a lot of the time. But what I noticed was that when the price is up, there's a repertoire of memes and there's a repertoire of phrases and there's a repertoire of emotions that people are pulling on and trying to amplify. But when the price is down, there's a whole different repertoire that tries to maintain confidence in people, that reframes this moment of loss as something that is, only one battle lost in a greater, uh, war or whatever of trying to make this thing popular. And so there's all of these sort of compensatory ways that people are interacting in this highly pleasurable but sometimes highly stressful community that undulates from everybody feeling up and ebullient to feeling down and like, oh shit, I just lost a ton of money. How am I and everybody else in this network promotional mechanism going to figure out how to get this thing back up? And so the communication dynamics of it are incredibly fascinating because there's these rhetorical undulations that move with the price in this collective unit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to hit pause real quick, Max. Someone's at my door. Can you just give me like 2 minutes to figure
You
out why they
gotcha.
won't go away? Okay. So I'll be right back.
Yeah, yeah.
right, sorry about that.
Good, you didn't get swatted or anything?
I forgot somebody was coming to do work and totally slipped my mind and they were trying to get in the back and I was like, thanks. Okay. So basically I'll just cut that and then I'll go straight into the next question so it kind of flows a little bit better. All right. Hang on, let me find my question. Okay, so you are co-editing a book that critically examines the history of the crypto industry. What are some of the key stories or patterns that stood out to you in your work?
So we haven't seen many of those stories yet. We're in the early phases of we have all of the contributors set, and we'll have their stories in the next couple months. But the book is called Shitcoin, and we're trying to prod at like what this term is. It kind of goes back to your previous question. There's even within the crypto industry, people throw around this term kind of as a boundary object of just like your coin is a shit coin, and therefore your community or your network promotional mechanism is either scammy, is a failure, is misled, has some sort of deficiency. And in the history of crypto, which is like 18 years old at this point, there's no shortage of those stories of coins that have, been the future or have had some weird, absurd moment where they. And so what this book is trying to do is make a collection of those stories to kind of prod at this way that people, even within the industry, critique it. And really just try to bring a bunch of absurd stories together that I think will be fun and instructive for readers who might not even know exactly what crypto is, and this could, I think, be a good introduction. It'll just be a bunch of short chapters of about 1,500 words or so, and each one of them will be a cryptocurrency or a project that has come, and most of them have gone. But I would say the interesting part about it is the way that people prod with legitimacy.
Yeah.
Shitcoin is kind of a word of saying you're illegitimate, and therefore your way of investing and doing money is illegitimate, or your view of the future and your view of technology is illegitimate, and mine, what I'm affiliated with, is legitimate. And so it's going to be fun to see how 20 to 30 of these stories look sitting next to each other, all of them calling each other in some ways more or less legitimate.
No, that's incredibly fascinating and such a good way to make that information accessible. Kind of like what you were saying, it could be a good introduction into this world and kind of educating oneself on this world. So I love that. I think that is absolutely fascinating and it sounds like definitely a great approach. Which kind of is a good segue into my next question. So we've talked about obviously the accessibility and kind of maybe an oversaturation of information available for people to hear a bunch of opinions and learn about everything in regard to finances thanks to the new media age. So for young adults trying to make smart financial decisions in a noisy digital environment, what communication cues or red flags should they be paying attention to?
I think the easiest one to point to is look for conflicts of interest. So for a lot of these personal finance influencers who are the ones that are directly telling you what you should do with your money, a lot of them are on their own sort of monetization journeys. And so you'll see some of them that are doing unpaid promotions early on, and they're trying to court companies, are trying to show that they can advertise well. And a lot of them do end up getting paid a lot of money to try to figure out some way to align this particular financial product with the values that are really unfolding in the account, and some more or less settled. But I've talked to one influencer, for instance, just anecdotally, that was making tens of thousands of dollars per month on with the sponsorship from, I think it was a crypto exchange, and didn't really understand what it was that she was promoting, and it ended up being FTX, which, if you're familiar at all with crypto, was the exchange that blew up and put Sam Bankman-Fried in federal prison. um, so, and that like left a sour taste in her mouth. But it just made me think how many of these other influencers out there who are getting these wonderful opportunities to make a lot of money for relatively little work of, just plugging a product in, a fourth or a tenth of their content that they put out. And also with people who promote cryptocurrencies or particular stocks or anything, there are a lot of incentives that could be misaligned, and there are a lot of promotions that they are doing the rationalization so they can fit it into their, corpus of advice. So that's the first thing, but it's also because it is so communal. And because people have such strong identification with other people who are on these same journeys and investing in these same assets and taking advice from people who they are talking to on social media and might have parasocial relationships with, it's just a sort of look yourself in the mirror kind of thing and ask, how deeply am I a part of this social mechanism and why? And to be honest with yourself, of like, what's it compensatory for if you are down bad? Like for a lot of people, they just stick in these communities because they collectively cope
Yeah.
together, and it's difficult to cut losses. And there's a lot of people online and a lot of people like you who have also lost money that don't want you to give up and don't want you to cut your losses. And I think that's one of the most dangerous cycles that people get into, is continuing to lose money over and over and over again, but have people continuously showing up on your feed or in your message forum saying like, okay, well, now we have an edge. Okay, well, you just need to listen to this. Okay, well, this time is going to be different. And people will spend years, sometimes with a little bit of success, sometimes with incredible success, but very, very rarely with incredible success, and end up, losing out and having a lot of psychological turmoil because of not being able to cut losses and not being able to recognize that this is a toxic cycle that
Yeah.
you fall into.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. So, my final question for you is, if listeners could make one shift in how they think about money and technology after this conversation, what would you want that shift to be?
One shift. Um, I would say, just kind of to summarize a lot of the stuff that I have already mentioned, is just to be wary. Um, there is a lot of great content out there that is going to guide you in a way that I think is healthy. And even some of that content is not tailored to you, is not tailored to your specific situation. There's a ton of aspirational content out there. It's, for me, I don't have any pretense that I'm going to make a huge, like systemic change in this. But what I want to do at an individual level with the stuff that I'm writing about and the conversations like this that I'm having is to become a little bit more reflective of the ways that money cuts through all of these other very complex parts of your life. And that's not to say that you need to start accounting for everything, as a lot of these influencers are telling you to do, and budget and make it so that every time you look at anything in your social reality that you have a dollar sign on it. But it does, I think, tune you into the fact that there are a lot of pressures that are taboo to talk about when it comes to money. And so to be able to address those in a way where you could cut through those taboos, and you could be honest with yourself, and you could be honest with friends who are caught up in toxic cycles of gambling and investing and so forth, and not buy into the socialization of that toxic aspect of it. That's what I would hope for, because it could be fun, it could be, it could give you adrenaline, but in most cases, it ends up harming you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And thank you so much for teaching me the term finfluencer, because I don't think I ever have thought about that before, because I'm clearly not immersed in that world, but that is actually hilarious. So I love that that is what they are referred to. But thank you so much for joining me and giving me some of your time today, Dr. Brichta. I really appreciate it. You are doing very important work, and I'm super glad we had the chance to talk about it a bit, and you had the chance to share with our listeners this very important information that is incredibly relevant in our modern society. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
And that's our conversation with Max Brichta. One of the biggest takeaways from this discussion is that money is never just about money. The ways we spend, invest, save, and think about financial risk are deeply connected to the stories we encounter, the technologies we use, and the communities we participate in online. As financial tools become more embedded in our everyday communication, from payment apps and investing platforms to social media and cryptocurrency communities, the ability to critically evaluate information becomes increasingly important. Financial literacy and media literacy are no longer separate skills. They're essential partners in helping people make informed decisions in a rapidly changing digital world. A huge thank you to Max for joining me and sharing his insights on the intersection of communication, technology, and finance. And thank you for listening to Cultivate Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone interested in communication, digital culture, financial literacy, or emerging technologies. Until then, keep cultivating conversations that matter.